Hey everybody, welcome to my session today on creating an authentic and profitable coaching business. My name is Joby Harrell, and I'm a business coach and leadership coach and the founder and principal of Nyan Leadership. And why are we here today? Well, I always start by setting intentions, and we're here to talk about business of coaching. There's a lot of stuff out there about the practice of coaching. There's certifications up the wazoo you can get. There's tons of great content out there and great tools about how to be an amazing coach. But there's not a whole lot out there in terms of how to run a coaching business. So I'm going to talk about that today. I'm going to talk today about contracts, what you need as a coach in your business as you're working with clients, as you're working with vendors and those kind of things. What you need to do in terms of marketing. There's a lot of crap out there in terms of marketing. And I say crap intentionally because it's not really great stuff out there. There's a lot of people who just don't know what they're doing. I'm sure they have at least somewhat neutral intentions, but they're out there taking money for things that they're not really doing a great job about. So I'm going to talk about that and talk about how to market yourself as a coach, both through networking as well as through the usual social media and marketing, digital marketing channels. Next, we're talking about networking, which is going to be going right along with marketing. It's a little bit distinct though, and you'll see why later. And lastly, we're going to talk about your ideal client, why it's important to take the time to define what your client looks like, even if it's just a temporary thing. That can obviously change as your skills practice, as your business grows and changes. Your ideal client may change as well. But we'll go through the steps of how to identify that and how to figure that out for yourself and talk about that today. All right. So first question you might ask is, who am I? Like I said, I'm a business and leadership coach. I do a lot of coaching for other coaches, as in terms of business coaching for other coaches. I actually have a whole process that I work through with coaches to help them figure out what kind of business they want to run. I do a lot of work with Georgetown. I was a Georgetown graduate for the leadership coaching program there. And since then, I've tried to come and give back, and I do assessing for them. I also work with a lot of Georgetown graduates of the coaching program to help them figure out what they want to do with their businesses and how they want to build a practice of coaching. I'm also the principal founder of Nyan Leadership. Like I said, Nyan actually means eyes in Hindi. And the whole idea is the more you see, the more you can do. You can only change something or be effective at changing something if you know it's there. And so awareness is the first step, and that's where it comes in. Next, I'm an artist, author, photographer, and creator. I love to create things. I consider coaching to be a creative process that I do with my clients. And as a result, that's why I think I really resonate with it so much, because it is a creative process. I'm a recovering attorney. I was an attorney for a while. I'm no longer one. So anything I talk about with the contracts, and I will mention this later, but I encourage you to seek the advice of an attorney, an actual licensed attorney, not myself. And I'm a huge nerd, as well as a dog rescue enthusiast. And these pictures are of me, obviously, in my various capacities. So let's jump right in and talk about contracts. All right. Until the contract is signed, nothing is real. Now, that's obviously not the way coaches think about the world. We're in the coaching world, we're very much about people being authentic and people being real. Unfortunately, the business world is not that way. And so we have to be mindful of that as we're running our coaching practice in businesses. So what is the purpose of a contract? One is to create an essential baseline understanding between you and your potential clients. I say potential because if the client hasn't signed the contract yet, they're not your client. So this creates an understanding so you both know where things stand. You both know what the expectations are of either side. So they know what they're getting in terms of number of meetings, how much they're paying, how often you guys are going to meet, what the cadence looks like, what kinds of topics you may cover. Maybe you put that in the contract, maybe you don't. But ultimately, you want to have a baseline understanding, especially around cancellations and those kind of things. And we'll talk about that shortly. It's not to be flowery and filled with coach speak. Well, again, we'll talk about that shortly, but what is coach speak? Coach speak is when everything is flowery, everything is wonderful, everything is amazing, and the world is exactly the way it needs to be successful and be happy. Unfortunately, business is not like that. Reality is not always that way. When you're talking with other coaches, it's always fun. It's always great because it's always a positive or at least optimistic outlook on things. And that's not the way a lot of our clients are going to be, especially not when they first come to us. So we want to make sure that we're able to work with them and meet them where they're at. We don't necessarily want to disconnect from them. And that's going to go into more messaging later we'll talk about. But be careful with the flowery and coach speak language in the contracts. Also, on top of that, the enemy of contracts is ambiguity. And flowery coach speak language is typically pretty ambiguous. So you want to be careful with that as well. So do not use coach speak. Like I said, it's confusing, it's ambiguous. If it comes to the point where hopefully it doesn't have to go to court at any point in time, but if it ever does have to go to court, which is kind of the reason the contracts exist, is so that you can keep an eye on things and make sure that you wanted to get these contracts to be enforceable by a court if need be, or an arbitrator or any kind of third-party person getting involved, mediator. You want the language to be as clear as possible, clear, concise language, and make sure that it's absolutely defined. Every aspect of your relationship engagement is defined. Do not copy and paste piecemeal from other contracts you find online. I've had several clients in the business coaching side of my business try to do this, and I've given them the advice not to do that. And business coaching, it does involve some advice. So for those of you who are very aware of coaching concepts, we don't do advice. Business coaching is kind of a mix of coaching and consulting. So there is some advice in there. I review a lot of these contracts, and a lot of times these different clauses from different contracts, they don't really match up with each other. And so you got to be really careful of that. That creates additional ambiguity, confusion, both with your client, with yourself, and with anyone who has to interpret that contract later. So you want to be really careful about that. Same idea here. Don't use someone else's contract without reviewing it closely. Now, there's some great contracts out there that you can definitely get in terms of boilerplate or templates you can download for free, maybe, but you want to make sure you review it and have it reviewed by an attorney as much as you can to make sure that you're it's at least meeting your needs and meeting what you want to be able to do with your clients. And I say, do not try to write your own with an asterisk, because again, you can write your own. The ultimate goal of a contract is clear understanding between two parties and what they call the meeting of the minds, right? So as long as you're able to achieve that with your client, that's totally fine. I say do not write your own, because people tend to get involved in coach speak and get involved with all these other flowery things and talking about things that don't actually have anything to do with the contract. A contract is an agreement of how you guys are going to engage with each other. It doesn't have to be a definition of what coaching is, which is my last do not do, which is going to be do not define what coaching is in the contract. This is not a hard do not do, but it's just a waste of time and space on the page. Ideally, by the time you're getting to the point where you're sending your client a contract or potential client a contract, they already know what coaching is. They already know what they're getting themselves into. And you've explained the value that you bring to the table. To be honest with you, here's a little secret. Clients don't really care what coaching is. They care about the value you bring to them. So you want to be clear about that. Do consult an attorney. Talk to an attorney. I know people want to save money, and that makes sense. I get it. When you're starting a business especially, you want to be very sensitive to how much you're spending. But when you're doing that, you also want to be intelligent about how you spend the money and intentional about that. Being a business owner, you're going to have to spend money. You're going to have to invest in your business. And in terms of places where you want to invest in a good attorney, because it will pay dividends down the line. Let's say, for example, you don't take the time to consult an attorney and get your contract reviewed, and it ends up being really ambiguous. And the client you end up taking on doesn't end up being a great person. They want to take you to court. You could end up losing a lot of money, time, energy. You could end up losing your entire business. Is it worth saving a couple $100 on the early front end side of your business to not have that risk come and be realized later on? I don't think so. So be really careful about that. And this is going to be a theme I'll mention throughout this whole entire presentation. But you have to spend money to make money eventually, right? But you want to spend and invest the money. You don't want to waste it. And consulting an attorney is not going to be a waste of money. Some of the other things we'll talk about later will be a waste of money if you do that. Use clear, concise, and direct language. This is if you do write the contract yourself, you want to use clear, concise, and direct language. Make sure that everything is as unambiguous as possible. All right. If there's a term that needs to be defined, try to define it as much as you can. You don't want to assume that anything is clearly defined outside of the contract. If it's an industry term, make sure the industry term is defined as well as you can be. Keep it simple. Again, straightforward, simple language. A lot of attorneys and contracts don't use simple language. That's because they're written for and by attorneys. You don't have to have a super complicated contract to make it enforceable, to make it clear. As long as your client understands what's going on, you understand what's going on, and everything is very clearly defined in the contract, you want to be able to make sure that's the case. All right. Define all terms. How often do you plan to meet? What's going to be the meeting cadence, right? What's the process for rescheduling or canceling sessions? You want to make sure that that's there so the clients respect your time. When you're starting out early as a coach, it's sometimes tough to kind of draw those lines and be like, I want to set boundaries with my clients. I want to make sure my clients know and value my time. You want to get the client, right? You want to make sure that you're, getting money in the door. At the same time, though, you have to respect your time. If you don't respect your time, your clients won't respect your time, and no one will respect your time. So make sure that's clearly defined in there. All right. Talk about fee structures, right? How often are you going to meet? How much does every session cost? Is there a specific length of a session? Is it 45 minutes? Is it an hour? 50 minutes? What does it look like, right? But also talk about any of the additional time. If there's phone calls included, if there's things like a 15-minute phone call, is that included or is that cost extra? You want to make sure those are all the terms you want to define. Late fees. If your client doesn't pay on time, what happens? Do you eat the cost? If it's not in the contract, you can't enforce it. So you want to make sure that those kind of things are in there. Term and process for renewal. If you specify the term, like it's a 9-month engagement or a 12-month engagement or a 6-month engagement, what's the process for renewal? Does the contract renew automatically? Is it just an ongoing contract on a monthly basis until someone cancels it? You want to be sure that these things are clearly defined in the contract. And that is the point of the contract. All right. So here's an activity we want to do today. A couple questions. I want you guys to take some time to put this into, if you want to, put them into the chat, put your answers into the chat window, and we'll be engaging with you there. Or feel free to just write them down for yourself. But it's important to answer these questions for yourself before you go into a contract situation. One is, what's the minimum term you want to work with a client? I asked this question because earlier, like I mentioned, you want to be able to specify with people what the term of engagement is. Is it ongoing? Is it a 3-month minimum? For me personally, I do a 3-month minimum with my clients because I make sure that they know that there is a time within which coaching is going to start working. The first session, I've given a lot of clients a lot of value out of the first session, but it's not always the case that they get that kind of value out of the first session. So you want to be careful with overpromising or those kind of things. But make sure you set expectations very clearly. Again, the whole purpose of contracts is setting expectations, setting rules of engagement, making sure that people understand exactly what they're going to get out of the engagements. And so I do a 3-month minimum, and then after that point, they can cancel at any point in time. So figure out what makes sense for you and your style of coaching and what you want to accomplish, and then go from there. Next is, how much do you charge? Like I said, I do a lot of work with Georgetown graduates from the coaching program, and a vast majority of them, I dare say 99% of them, don't know how much to charge. And that's normal because there's not really a clear going rate for coaching. I mean, any country you go to is going to be a different rate. Any industry you go to is going to be a different rate. Depending on your level of certification, if people care about that, right, it's going to be a different rate. There are people out there who are not certified at all who are charging ridiculous amounts of money. And there are people who are certified and are excellent coaching and undercharging significantly. So you want to make sure you know where you stand and figure out what makes sense for you. Little food for thought. Chances are, if you're a new coach, you're probably charging less than you need to be charging. What is your cancellation policy? Again, I go back to respecting your time and respecting your energy. When you are in a coaching situation with someone, you're preparing for that session beforehand. You're putting energy into that client, and you're preparing your day and scheduling your time in such a way that no one else can schedule with you for that period of time that you're coaching that person. So if they cancel 5 minutes before, that impacts your schedule, impacts your energy, it impacts your entire day. So you want to make sure that there's a clear understanding between you and your clients of what the cancellation policy is. What is the proper way that you want people to engage with you? And what happens when a client doesn't pay you? I say when, but if/when the client doesn't pay you, because once in a while it may happen, or they may just be late. So these are things you want to be able to clarify in there, in your contract. Now, I talked to a couple of coaches about this, people that I've coached on the business coaching side of things, and they get worried about this. Well, if I put in there some really strict guidelines about if they can't pay me, what happens if they're going through a really tough time? And I really want to be sensitive to that. Well, the great things about contracts is that you can choose to enforce it or you can choose not to. It's all on you, but it gives you the option to enforce it. If your client is one of those guys or girls who's not really a savory person and you didn't know that going into the situation, you want to make sure you cover that base. And that's going to help you with that. Like I said, take a minute, review these questions, make sure you jot down the answers to them, even just thoughts about them. And if you have questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat. I'll be engaging with you there. Next, let's talk about marketing. If a tree falls in the forest and no one's around to hear it, insert question here. Does it matter? Does it really make a sound? Well, I don't know. If you start your business and no one knows about it, do you have a business? So the purpose of marketing, what is that? Well, it's to create brand awareness in the demographics that matter to you. And that last piece is what matters, the demographics that matter. And we'll talk about that later on. You want to provide a platform for you so you can showcase your expertise. You want to be able to let people know you're good at what you do and that you know what you're doing. Because if you don't do that, people won't know you exist. They won't know who you are, and they won't be able to go seek your help if they need it. Next is to get involved in conversations with other experts and potential clients. And this is something we'll talk about both in networking as well as in this marketing piece of the puzzle here. And also is to connect with the potential clients and those around them. That's another part we'll talk about, especially around networking. All right. Now for the do's and don'ts. Do not try to copy what others are doing. This is something that a trap people fall into a lot of times. What works for marketing for one person is not always going to work for the next person. There are general marketing theories that are applicable across different things, different platforms, different ideas. But every platform, every social media platform has a different set of rules. Every authentic person has a different set of rules as well that they operate under, different values. What works for one person in terms of the way that they're marketing themselves won't necessarily be authentic for you. So you got to find what works for you and make sure that you're using authentic messaging that comes from you and is in your particular style. Because if they resonate with the person that you pretend to be, and then they meet you and you're totally different, that's not going to go well for you in terms of getting clients. Don't try to be on every platform. All right. There are certain platforms where you already have a presence and you want to be on there and that they're, again, authentic with your style. That's totally fine. Keep those platforms going. You don't have to be on every single platform. You don't have to go after everything. For example, I'm not on TikTok. We tried it a little while ago. I might try again later, but right now it's not really my style. I'm on Instagram, I'm on YouTube, and I'm on Facebook, sort of. I'm also on LinkedIn and Twitter here and there, but in different capacities. I do different things on each one of those platforms because my style on each one of those that's authentic to me still is a little bit different. There's different goals for each one of those platforms, and I use those accordingly. So be mindful of that as you're doing your marketing. Don't spend a ridiculous amount of money on Facebook ads. I'm sorry, but they don't really work for coaches because guess what? People need to know that they resonate with that particular coach. I've seen a lot of ads for coaching schools and those kind of things, and that's a different demographic. They're catering to people who want to become coaches or want to make some money on the side. And to be honest, those schools kind of not that great. But don't spend a lot of ridiculous money on Facebook ads right out the gate. Maybe later on, once you have a clear set of messaging or you have a clear offering you want to do, that's different. But for your general coaching, not going to be helpful for you. Do not spam everyone on LinkedIn with generic cut and paste messages. This is one of the biggest ones you want to avoid because you will get thrown into the box of being a spam bot. And that's what a lot of people do. You'll find a lot of companies that do this, and they're called lead generation companies. And they specialize in lead generation for coaches. They suck, FYI. They're not really great for you, and they're not going to be beneficial for you. They're going to give you a bad reputation in the community in general. People are going to look at you as a spam bot, and they're not going to take you seriously. So be really careful about these companies. And do not create a complicated, elaborate website. We're coaches. We're not IT professionals. You don't need a complicated website unless you're creating a very specific niche offering that you want to really, really flesh out. In terms of general coaching practice, a simple website about you, about your practice, what your philosophies are, and how to get in touch with you. That's really all you need to do. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. Ideally, if you want to put a blog on there, that's great. That's a great way to do that. Again, not very complicated. It's not elaborate. A blog is actually very, very simple, and it gets you a chance to promote yourself and allows, again, it's another part of marketing. And do not parrot political rhetoric. This one I added recently because of the last 2.5 years. The last 10 years really, but politics does not belong in coaching. So please stay away from that. I mean, it's going to do more damage than it will do good. I promise. So just be careful with those kind of things. Things you can do and absolutely need to do. Create authentic content that's meaningful to you. If it's meaningful to you and resonates with you, it'll probably resonate with your clients as well. At least the clients you want to get. And we'll talk about that shortly. Take time to define your ideal clients, which we will actually do later on in this session today. Be where your audience is. Goes back to the earlier thing I mentioned about going on different platforms. Figure out what platforms are good for you and authentic for you and your style of coaching, and go on those platforms. That's where your audiences are going to be. Find out who they are and where they are, and then you be there. Also, in terms of meetup groups, going back to that question for a second, in terms of meetup groups or networking organizations, you want to be where your audience is. Next, do hire a company to help with social media marketing strategy. This is different from lead generation. Lead generation is someone you're buying leads, you're buying lists, or you're paying for them to do outreach for you in a hopefully not spammy way, but typically they are pretty spammy. So companies out there exist that are amazing at social media marketing or digital marketing in general. And they're not the ones who are going to say they're specialized in lead generation. They're the ones that will say something to the effect of, we'll create a marketing funnel for you. We will create SEO for your website and for your social media strategy. We'll create content strategy for you. We will write blogs for you or create things in your voice. Those are the companies you want to listen to and talk with. And even then, talk with a bunch of them. Don't just go after the first one that you hear about. Get involved in meaningful conversations on social media that showcase your expertise. This is a really, really big one, and it's something that a lot of people don't do often enough. You post a lot of blog posts, you post a lot of articles. That's great, but what's your take on it? Why am I going to just look at you as a source of articles, or am I going to look at you for a source of original thought or points of view? Give your points of view. Contribute to other people's posts as well. Get in the comments. Get involved in those comments. Get visible. That's one thing you can really, really do well. Activity-wise, again, get involved in the chat with these questions. Feel free to post your answers in the chat and take a minute after this is posted to really take the time to specify for yourself what these answers are going to be. What social media platforms are you already active on? What social media platforms are your potential clients active on? The ones you want to work with. Does your website convey the value proposition from the point of view of your clients? Not your point of view. Again, this goes back to the definition of coaching thing, right? They don't care what the definition of coaching is. You can ask 15 different people what the definition of coaching is. And if you get 15 different answers, that doesn't matter, because what's the value proposition? What are you going to do for them? From their point of view, they want to know that you can help them with whatever they're dealing with. They don't care how you define coaching, as long as you're able to help them and give them the value that they need. So focus on that. And why is working with you different from working with another coach? What's the value you personally bring to that conversation, to any coaching engagement that you get involved in? That's what you want to focus on. All right, networking. Now, this is again related to the whole marketing thing. It is a piece of marketing, but it's extremely important as a business owner, especially as an individual business owner. If you're a solo practitioner of coaching, this is going to be really, really key for you. It doesn't matter who you know or even doesn't matter what you know or even who you know. What matters is who knows you, who knows your name, and who wants to reach out to you when it comes down to those kind of things. That's what marketing and what networking is really about, right? So networking wise, do not try to sell people during their first conversation. This is something that a lot of people fall into this trap of trying way too hard to be like, oh, do you want to hire me? Do you need a coach? Like, chill out, have the conversation, make the connection first, get them comfortable with you, let them know that what you do, find out more about what they do, really interact, and then see if there's an opportunity for you to help them. Chances are, even if you say, do you know anyone who needs a coach? They're like, I don't know what a coach is. So no, I don't know anyone who needs a coach. Be really careful of that, because then you're going to be, again, labeled as spammy or just completely salesy all the time. Don't only try to connect with potential clients. This is one that a lot of people fall into the trap of, which is just saying, oh, this is not going to be a good use of my time because that's not a potential client. So why would I talk to this person? Well, you never know. They may have a best friend who is your ideal client. They may be involved in a networking organization that is full of your potential clients. You never really know until you actually connect with these people and find out more about their story, more about what they do and who they are. So be really careful about disqualifying people up front based on arbitrary criteria. Do not make it all about you. What I mean by this is don't talk about yourself for the entire meeting. Whenever I have a networking or introduction call, I always make the first half of that call about the other person, finding out more about who they are, what their story is, what they do for a living, what their business or job is, how they got into that position, what do they love about it, what do they not like about it. Really find out more about them and who they want to meet. I open my network up to everyone I meet when I first meet them, especially because I like being a giver. I like being a resource for people, whether they're my clients or not. And so I open my network and saying, who do you want to meet? Who can I introduce you to in my network? And if they tell me someone that I know, I'll make the introduction happily. Reciprocity is a really powerful thing. And so you want to make sure you're tapping into that in your networking work. Don't add everyone to your email list and start spamming them. Again, do not be spammy. And then there you go. Don't spam people. So be really mindful of these things as you're going through your networking processes. Things you should be doing. Again, things you want to be doing. Try to learn about every person and their position or business. Find out more about them and where they came from, what they do. That's going to give you a lot of insight into maybe why they might be a good client for you or who they might know in their network who could be a good client for you. Definitely create connections intentionally, all right? But not selfishly. You don't want to make sure that you don't want to create selfish connections and just make it all about you again, like you said before. Do be a resource for your connections. And what I mean by being a resource is, again, making connections for them, finding out who they want to know, who they need to know, and suggesting connections for them. Like I said, I open my network to all the folks that I can, especially my clients. Right? When my clients are working with me, they get my entire network as access. If they need anything, chances are I either know someone who can do it or know someone who knows someone who can do it. And the chances are I can personally vouch for that person. That's why I make the connections I do. And that's what I enjoy doing, is being that resource for the connections. People start coming to me more often. And as a result, now I have a lot more open possibilities for potential clients. Do ask for permission before you add anyone to your network. And by network, I mean email lists or LinkedIn or that kind of thing. Don't just send blind requests. Make sure that permission is a really powerful thing. Make sure people want to be in your network and want to be in your email list. That way they'll actually enjoy or engage with you on those kind of things. All right, activity-wise, where do you currently make new professional connections? All right, take a list of those things. Make a list, throw them into the chat if you want to, but make a list for yourself, again, of the same activity processes we did before. All right. How much time and energy do you invest in networking? If you're saying not too much, like an hour a week or an hour a month, that's not enough as a business owner. You want to get your name out there. Remember, people have to know you exist. You can know the entire world, but if they don't know you, it doesn't matter. How many new connections do you want to make per month? This is a really important question. You may not be able to answer this right now, but as you go through and think about your processes, how you do sales, how you do marketing, how you work with your clients, and how many clients your capacity is in general, you want to be able to fill that capacity as much as possible so you can live and enjoy your life. So think about how many connections you need to make in order to have connections to new potential clients at all times. One of the most difficult things of being a business owner is keeping that pipeline flowing. And you want to make sure you're intentional about that, because otherwise it will dry up and you'll have to end up going for a couple of months with zero income or very little income. So be careful about that. And lastly, how often do people come to you for connections to other people? All right. This is one thing I love to do. And it goes back to what I mentioned earlier, which is being that resource for both clients and networking partners. Make sure that you're able to make connections for people. If they reach out to your listserv and ask you questions like, oh, who knows someone who does this and this and this? Be that person who can say, I actually know someone in that line of work. I'd be happy to connect you with them. And the way you get there is by continuously networking, meeting new people. That'll allow you to be on both sides of that spectrum and help people out. Lastly, defining your ideal client. When you speak to everyone, you speak to no one. So this goes along with a little bit of the idea of creating a niche. We'll talk about that in a second. But what's the point of defining your ideal client? Well, it allows you to focus your marketing. And any marketing expert will tell you when you have a clear demographic you're targeting, it's much more effective to do that. If you try to do a blanket shotgun approach, you're not really going to get the results you want to get. You want to focus on percentages, right? You want to focus on conversions in terms of marketing terms. You want to make sure that you're able to speak to the people that matter to you, that are going to be good clients for you. It also helps you refine your messaging. This is very, very key in marketing. Any expert marketer is going to tell you your messaging is what makes a difference between successful marketing and sales versus unsuccessful marketing and sales and wasting your money. If you don't tailor your messaging to who you want to go for, you're not going to get the results you want. And you're not going to get the pipeline you want, which will not lead to clients. It also enables you to build your brand around your ideal clients. So you want to build a brand that your clients resonate with. And ideally, that's your authentic brand. So you want to focus on that, being authentic, being that brand, and letting people know who you are and how you interact with your clients. It also motivates your clients to want to reach out to you. This one is actually really, really huge, and it's very underrated. A lot of marketing focuses on outbound marketing, but you also want to worry about situations where you're asking your clients to reach out to you. For example, putting calls to action on your website, making sure that people know that they can reach out to you, and letting people know how to reach out to you when you want them to. And lastly, it helps you define your niche. And there's this asterisk because I always say you don't necessarily need a niche, but you do need it to target a demographic. Now, what's the difference? When you're talking about target demographics, you're talking about general ideas of people who may work with you, right? You can talk about things like people who have specific problems, specific challenges that they're dealing with, right? If they're dealing with imposter syndrome, for example, or if they're dealing with a tough boss, right? Or if they want to grow to the next level of their leadership, or if they're new in leadership. These are all opportunities to refine that target population you're going for. If you have an industry, that's great. But a lot of people, when they come out of coaching school, when they get your new coaches, they don't know how to define that niche for themselves. And again, you don't need a niche per se. The niche can evolve over time. You can just coach everyone that you can in the beginning, get an idea of who you enjoy coaching, and then go from there. And that takes us very nicely into our activity. So for this activity, you actually have a handout, which is in the chat for you guys, and you guys can feel free to jump in and do that. We'll give you a minute here to do that. But on this handout, list the last 5 clients you had, okay? And if you haven't had five clients yet, list as many as you can keep track of, or list people that you enjoy interacting with. And we'll talk about that in a second. Describe the most energizing and the most draining characteristics of those clients or those people. And that's going to give you a little bit of an idea into the patterns. And you want to look at those patterns and start with those patterns in terms of who you enjoy interacting with and figure out why that's the case. Those are kind of going to be the clients that you're looking for. Maybe it's an industry, maybe it's a personality type, maybe it's a level of leadership. For those of you who are familiar with adult development, maybe it's a level of adult development. Maybe it's that stage of adult development that you enjoy working with. Maybe it's something totally different that will evolve over time. But you want to make sure that you're at least taking the time to look into that and see what those patterns are that evolve. If you already have a niche, this will help you refine it. This will really help you to hone in on that niche and figure out for yourself, what do I really want to hone in on? Who's my ideal client? Like ideal. Who are the ones that I'm excited to work with? I don't mean the clients that are going to pay you really well. Ideally, you want to get overlap, right? You want to get someone who can pay you really well and be your ideal client. But I'm talking about focusing on your energy, right? I talked about your time earlier, your time and your energy being extremely important. And those are the most important things as business owners. You can always make another dollar. You can never make another minute. So you want to make sure you're not wasting a single minute, a single second on the wrong people or the wrong time. And so when you have this niche, you're creating this messaging around the people that you want to tap into, people that light you up as people, as you're interacting with them, you love interacting with them. Like you're looking forward to the session with this person. Those are people I'm trying to help you find. If you don't have a niche, this will help you get started, right? You want to get started in this process and make sure that this is a process that you're doing on a regular basis. It doesn't have to be every other week or anything like that, but every couple of years, you want to do this process again and say, okay, of my last 10 or 15 clients, who have I really, really enjoyed working with? Because this can change. Who you enjoy working with as you grow, as you change, as your practice changes, as your coaching grows and changes, your style is going to change a little bit. The way you interact with people is going to change a little bit. And you want to make sure that you're keeping track of this as you go through that process. So all that to say, this is one of the most important things you want to be able to do. And this is a very oversimplified version of what we're talking about, but we only have so much time. So take a few minutes right now. I'll engage with you guys in the chat. If you have questions, feel free to throw them in the chat and I can talk with you through this whole process. But it's extremely important that you take the time to do this particular activity. If you've done no other activities today, do this one, because this is going to help you across the entire course of your practice. And with that, guys, I hope this was a great session for you. Thank you so much for taking the time to attend my session today and for coming to Converge. This is something that I love doing. Like I said, I love co-creating with other folks, business owners, coaches, clients. It's all created for me, so I love it. If you have questions, please feel free to reach out to me, drew@9leadership.com. Check out my LinkedIn. I post a lot of articles and stuff like that there as well. But my YouTube channel is where I'm probably the most active. I do a lot of videos. I do interviews. I do live streams. And I cover all kinds of topics, anywhere from business to leadership. Some of them are travel related, but it's all related back to coaching in some way or another. I also have a really cool, I think it's cool anyway, series I do called Cinema Coach, where I take popular movies and TV and pull out the coaching concepts and themes from there and talk about those. So check it out when you get a chance. If you guys want to reach out to me, if you scan that QR code, you can get a Calendly page for me, and you can schedule some time on my calendar to connect and talk about your business or whatever else you want to know. Thanks so much, guys. Take care and hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.